Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Menopause Matters. I understand this has been a challenge for a lot of women over 40 going to the menopause stage. So today I have another expert here for you to help you to get some clarity, to help you to get some instructions, and to help you to battle the challenges in menopause. So today I have Laurie Morse here. Hi, Laurie. Thank you so much for coming onto our show today. Please
Hey,
tell us a
Martha.
little bit about you.
Well, let's see. I'm a practitioner of Chinese medicine for 33 years. I'm 63. I started going through menopause at 42. So not only do I have a personal, intimate experience with menopause, I've also been helping women for about that same time, just move through the menopause journey with grace.
Mm,
We don't always get taught that grace or ease could be an option, even as the tumultuous changes are happening. So that matters to me when we talk about menopause mattering. That is what matters to me. I've written 2 books, and I'm in the middle of my third book. And the coolest thing is that my third book is on menopause, and it's
ah.
going to be talking about all the things that matter to you and me and all the women listening. Can I read a short little sentence from the book?
Oh, please do.
In the epic chrysalis, the chrysalis, like from the caterpillar to the butterfly, in the epic chrysalis of a woman's existence, there's a moment when age, hormones, wisdom, and change decide to throw a wild party, creating a phase that can only be described as transformation with a side of tricky.
I hear
So,
you on it. It has been tricky because I didn't even know I was experiencing all those menopause symptoms until that I started to read from
yes.
people saying that, oh, like, I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that. I'm like,
I don't feel
oh,
like
okay.
myself, and my moods are flying all over the place. I know, and this is what you just said is what I've heard from hundreds of women. So it's like, well, why don't we start having a conversation so we can, instead of hearing about Oprah's experience of being condescended to by her doctor, which is I feel for her.
Mm,
I have great compassion for that, but it's like, why don't we start having that conversation earlier, right? Because there's this runway where we start kind of tapping into the perimenopausal phase, and then we move into the full menopausal phase, and then there's postmenopause. And that's like half of our life, right? So
mm.
it makes the most sense to me to begin having, not shrouded in mystery, but have it as open conversations so we can all help each other.
That sounds wonderful. So, what is the first thing to know about the energy level to ensure that we can get the most balance throughout menopause?
Yeah. So okay with you if I dive into the deep end on this one,
Go for it,
right?
please.
Because it's I try to not be overly dramatic about this, but but because I know how important it is,
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like I'm a little dramatic. One of the things that Chinese medicine has taught me, so in Chinese medicine, there's this phenomenon called qi, and it's
Yeah.
just a Chinese word for life force, energy. It's the thing that's beating our heart and pumping our blood right now, digesting our food. We don't have to do anything for that to happen. Every particle of life is this life force, right? We think, and it changes. So midlife happens, we walk through that portal, and it's like, what is happening here? What is happening with my energy? And I think one of the biggest complaints is that our energy is low, that we have our metabolism changes, we do all the right things with nutrition, but we still can't lose weight. Our moods are swinging all over the place. I mean, the list is really, really long. We'd be here till midnight if we listed all the symptoms, right? But the underpinning of every single one of those things is the management of our life force or our energy, right? And not like, oh, go have a green smoothie and I'll feel more energy. And there's nothing wrong with green smoothies. I have them all the time. I'm just saying it's deeper and wider, and there's more substance to it than just a green smoothie or getting a massage. And what I mean by that is that this life force, this chi, this energy that is giving us this entire experience on planet Earth, including our bodies, is made out of particles of light, light.
Mm,
And so if we can begin to have a conscious relationship with our energy as light, and invite more in, just like a Tesla goes and plugs into what do they call those stations, like to charging stations, right? If we do the same thing, then we can keep our own tanks more full than not, which means our body doesn't have to struggle as hard. Most of us feel like in the worst of this menopausal journey, we're like scraping at the bottom of the barrel. There were days when I was laying on the couch, and I'm a fairly energetic person, I couldn't even get off the couch, and all I could do was cry. To top it off, I didn't sleep for 4 months. So that was this terrible catch 22 that was just torturous, right? And when I talk to women, and I was just in a menopause a group with over 100,000 people in it, and we were having this conversation, and my heart was breaking again because these women were just in misery, and those are the words they use. I'm miserable. I don't know how to stop being miserable. And I forgot how miserable it was, even though I'm still, like managing my energy. So I have the best balance, body, mind, and spirit. Um, I forgot how miserable it is in the thick of it. So I think if you can ask me questions if you want to know more, but just I want to put on the table for every listener to please be open to cultivating your life force with light. It's the cheapest medicine available. It's already in existence. It's personal medicine, and you don't have to spend a dime to invite this energy into you and to teach you what choices need to be changed. Like usually in Chinese medicine, when things are out of balance, we either have to stop something and or add something. So for an example, some people might need to consider stop eating sugar for a period of time if their inflammation is too high. They may need to change their sleep hygiene in order to cultivate a better night's sleep. I mean, that list is long, right? Or someone might have to start moving their body in a different way, or start like having conversations in their own head, more kindly, with more kindness, right? Because most of us are pretty good critics and judgers of ourselves, and when things go cattywampus, like what happens in menopause, it takes a minute to get our footing, doesn't it? And to go, wait a minute, okay, what just happening here? And then when we get that footing, the first stop on that path is almost always, maybe not the case for everyone, but a lot of times to sort of judge our situation and be critical and impatient and resist it. And if there was one thing I wish someone would have told me in the very beginning, and I tell women this now, if there's one thing that I would have wished someone told me is don't resist. Resistance is futile, as Star Trek says. Because that resistance is that's a stress response for our physiology and the chemistry that gets released out of our brain in a stress response. And believe me and you and everybody listening already knows this, menopause in and of itself is very stressful on our physiology. So the best gift we can give ourselves is to, find ways to come to center, soften, and not resist. Do the opposite of resistance to you. And, there's of course a lot of tools for that, mindfulness and breath work, and all kinds of tools in order to do that. But I say that, I just want to say that the first stop is if you can find your way to the invitation of light and to the calming of the stress response that's already out of your control, the easier and more graceful your journey will be.
It is so true because I understand that a lot of us get stuck in this mindset that, oh, I'm going through something. It is going to be horrible. It is going to be, oh my God, like there's no way out of this. And I think with that mindset, that already affected us to this doom. There's that, oh, there's nothing going to work. Nothing will be there for me. And I think just being able to channel that light to realize that, hey, it is just an experience that we're going through. This is something that we can overcome. And I think that will help us dramatically.
Yeah, I would say yes on the doom. And that happens at a mental level, an emotional level, a physical level, and sometimes on a spiritual level. I will say that the more one has a cultivated relationship with their spirituality, I think they have something more to draw on than one who doesn't have that cultivation quite as strong. But I am going to change the word overcome with your
Mm-hmm.
permission
Mm-hmm.
to move through and come out the other end um, stronger and more expanded as a result of it.
Mm.
I want to say that because these are subtle distinctions that get
Yeah.
sort of like in our put in our face by our own experience. And the subtle distinction is in our fertile years, we had lots of energy to blow. We had tons of resilience. We could spend that life force any way we wanted, and there would be more coming, right? And
Yes.
because we live in a Western culture, we tend to be more programmed to push and operate in a more masculine,
Yes.
way of being, not putting that down, but it isn't balanced.
Mm.
And menopause forces us into a softer and more receptive and more allowing and more receiving and more feminine balance. And
Yes.
we're not getting rid of the masculine part of us because that's very well developed. We're just coming in to harmonize with more feminine energy, which is not overcoming. I'm sorry to pick on that word, but it's like that's a very clear distinction that's important to have a relationship with.
Mm.
And
That
this,
I like that.
this masculine and feminine idea, it's the yin and the yang. It's the alpha and the omega. It's light and love. Light carries love, by the way. It cannot be separated. Light cannot and love cannot be separated from each other. Light is the masculine, love is the feminine. So we're drawing in these energies for greater and greater harmony, and we're almost forced to during menopause. But
Mm.
when we are willing to sort of turn to this harmonizing of our energies in the way we're talking about masculine and feminine, it makes it so much easier.
That is so true. That is so true. It's not about like getting rid of it, but learning to live with it and actually make the best out of it.
Make the best of it and use it as a springboard to become greater than you can ever imagine yourself being. Because in the chrysalis of it, where it feels dark and scary and unrecognizable, and there's hardly any room to move, it is hard to put our arms, get our arms around the idea that we're going to be better, even more like new and improved. Like that's a pipe dream in the middle of it, right?
Mm, that
But it's
is true.
actually, when I was going through menopause in the early stages, my offices as an acupuncturist were in, there was three different businesses in one suite. And one of them was a nonprofit organization for women in third world countries, and so there were a lot of older women who would come and volunteer. And I remember grabbing onto their arms and just saying, please tell me that this gets better. And they all said, oh, it not only does it get better, it's like it's better than even before. And I hung on to that like a frigging lifeline. I mean, I remember I would tell myself in the midst of a hard period or whatever, I'd be like, okay, Janie said it was going to get better. And so and so said it was going to get better. So I'm going to trust that it's going to be not only better, but better than I can imagine. And that panned out to be true.
That is so cool to hear. So, what are
Mm.
the number one myth about menopause and why does it matter?
Yeah, I would say probably there's a lot of myths, but one of the ones that I think is detrimental to women is that it's a disease or a problem. And rather than it being a disease or a problem, when we've kind of touched on this, it's not. It's a natural transition. Every woman born was meant to have a menses, the menarche and the menopause. And these are bookends of having all the eggs we'll ever have and then no longer having eggs to be fertile as menopause, right? That's a natural process. It's programmed into each of us as women. Sometimes it's, made to happen through surgery or hysterectomies or whatever, but nonetheless, it's still going to happen to all of us or for all of us. I'd rather like reword that instead of say to us, because then it's like, that thing that we've been talking about, like, oh no, what a big thing, a problem this is. It's like, no, this happens for us. Now my sister asked me this the other day. We were talking, and she's 5 years younger than me, so she's 58. And she said, what is it? Why is it that some women have a little bit, and she didn't use the word grace, but we've used the word grace, so I'm going to use that word. Why is it that some women have a problem with like hot flashes? She said, when I started getting hot flashes, I made a decision in my mind. Oh, her question was, does the mind influence our menopausal experience? And she said, because when I started having hot flashes, I decided I am not going to let this like throw me off balance. I'm going to stay in my center, and I'm just going to ride it out. Opposed to all the women that she was watching around her that would tear off their sweaters and say, "Oh my God, isn't it hot in here? And can someone please turn down the temperature, the whatever, the air or whatever." And it's like, I don't have any judgment of that because I've done that. But the point is, and this was a really good question that she asked, is because when we notice that something is happening in our body, if we have a practice of coming back to our center, it releases chemistry from our brain that will support us in maintaining a stability and a harmony and a peace in our body to the degree that is possible under the circumstances. But when a woman is losing her shit, and again, it's understandable because I've done it, then the chemistry that gets released out of the brain is stress response chemistry. It's corrosive. It increases inflammation. It doesn't give us any chance of coming back to any, modicum of center that's going to be enjoyable, right? Not that we're going to enjoy ourselves through a hot flash, but, just at least coming to the middle road, right? So I can't remember what the question was.
Is that like, what is the number one myth about menopause
Oh,
and
the
why
myth, right? That it's a problem and a disease, and it's not. It's a natural uh, process. It's a natural phase. It's a natural experience that every woman must go through if she lives long enough to go through it.
That's true. That is so true. So, what is the deal with the hormones and the weight that we experience in the menopause phase?
Well, it's a perfect it's a perfect thing to talk about after what we just talked about.
Mm,
Because mostly women, well, okay, I have to say this part first. And I will just speak from my own experience. I
mhm.
had to very significantly change the way I ate when menopause was in its peak. I could not get away with what I used to get away with. I used to be able to eat anything, cannot do that anymore. So I had to be very honest with myself, and I had to like learn from my own body because she's very smart. This is not a head process, it's an embodied process. Like what is my body wanting to eat and
Mm,
how much? I'm an overeater. I'm so nervous about where my next meal is coming from in my present meal. We were talking about hunger before we
yeah.
got on the yeah. I had to have brought that in with me in my DNA because I have no experience in this lifetime of starvation. But we
Mm,
all have DNA from our lineage and our ancestry that carries starvation. So we get nervous about So I had to realize, oh, I can't keep doing that. And I had to change the way I eat, period. Clean. I personally gave up sugar because I have diabetes in my genetics. It was killing me. I felt like horrible eating sugar. I feel excellent not being on sugar. And I went on and off and back and forth and in and out of, giving it up and going back and thinking that I wasn't addicted to it. And then I had to realize and just admit to myself, sugar for my system is addicting. I can't have it anymore, just like an alcohol or a cocaine addict can't have their drug, right? So
mm,
that has made a huge difference for me. But I'm not saying that everyone has to give up sugar. I'm just saying this is what we have to discern in ourselves.
mm,
And then the other piece is that stress response we talked about. So, especially when women are carrying weight around their midsection, it's because there's too much cortisol being released out of our adrenals, and that's a stress response. So, the minute that we resist and have stress responses and can't find our center when anything is happening, whether it's an emotional swing or a hot flash or a bad night's sleep or, all the things, right? Or pain, shoulders and hips are big players in women's bodies during, main menopause phase. And that's just because hormones are changing. And so
Mm,
when we constantly fuel the stress response, it is going to be very hard to be metabolically efficient. And,
mhm,
our metabolism is what dictates whether we gain or lose weight. So
mhm.
that's one of the core things right there.
That is so cool to actually know because I do hear a lot of people asking for support onto it. So tell us about what you do to help women going through this transition process.
Yeah. So I'm finishing this book on menopause. I realized I started this online Sacred Health Academy like five years ago, I think. And then I realized I need to start talking more about menopause because the academy is supporting women in the second half of life to connect with their spirit and their soul, their life force, in order to have access to that to navigate all the things.
Mhm,
And we talk about how to have conversations with your doctor, especially if they're not being supportive. We talk
mhm,
about nutrition, we talk about hormones, we talk about sleep, we talk about all the things physically, but we also talk about how to bring to be. Oh, let me say this before I say the thing I was just about to say. One of the things that is clear, and Christiane Northrup talks about this in her book, The Wisdom of Menopause, is that everything that we've shoved under the carpet or stuffed into the closet by the time we get up to menopause is going to show itself for us to release, bring to peace, heal, transform, and tend. And that was definitely my experience. And I do not know a single woman for whom that is not the experience. So in the Sacred Health Academy, there's a whole section on a whole, phase where we talk about, well, how do we tend the emotional energy that comes up?
yeah.
Because we don't learn that. We don't learn the management of emotional energy, just like we don't learn the management of any part of our energy growing up, especially in the West. I think the Eastern cultures have a little bit better relationship with that. But I've not lived in the East, so I can't really say I know that for sure. I just know it because I've been steeped in Chinese medicine for so long that I have to imagine that that's true because that's what they learn, right? And so and Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic the medicines of the East is what I'm talking about. I don't mean to just say that Chinese medicine is the only good medicine because there's a lot of good medicines. And I love that Chinese medicine has stood the test of time. It would not have stood the test of time if there wasn't deep roots to it.
Mm,
Anyway, so that's how I support women. And then I also, for those who want to come in person, I also see women in person, but I basically walk by their side and help them through all of the worry and the mental spin, all of the emotional tangles, all of the parts of themselves that wants to be a different woman but doesn't know how to become that different woman. It's so interesting. There's a book called the women's brain tracks or something like that. It's basically, or a woman's brain, I think it's called. And up until this research, all the research on brains were done by men, of course, just like the same thing. All the research on hearts were done by men, on men, to in service of men. And nobody bothered to, they were just an assumption that, well, women's hearts and women's brains must be the same, so we'll just treat them the same. It's not, they're not. What's so fascinating about a woman's brain is around the age of 8 years old, a brain track is laid for connection and communication. And this is where girls at 8, and I love this part. I remember this part, and I love little girls at 8. They're like wanting to spend the night with their friends, and they're texting, or if they have phones, or they're calling each other. And, they're really, you can see all this happening before our own eyes. And then around 16 to the 20s, it's all about preening and attracting a mate. And that's why girls at 16 go shopping in malls with 3-inch heels. And, and those women in menopause are like, what the hell? Why would they, well, but it's because of this, right? They're looking to attract a mate, and it's all about, producing and perpetuating the species, right? And then from about late 20s to late 30s, like the very first year or two of the 40s, it's all about pleasing and harmony, because evolutionarily in our brain, if we don't maintain harmony in our family, it means we get tossed out of the clan with our children and we die, right? So this explains why women who have young children and are in this general bracket of age, and this brain track is very, very on much online. Oops, what happened? Well, anyway, is very much online. If her husband is abusive to her, she won't leave because she has to make the greatest harmony within her family and within herself and for her children, that she'll do whatever it takes at her own sacrifice to keep this harmony. And then this is the good part. All of that is to lead up to the next brain track. And apparently the last brain track, according to the research, there may be more, but it wasn't available yet as research. It's a brain track where and this is our life right now, right? Those of us who are listening, this is the brain track where we evaluate our life. We say, okay, I've just raised a family, or not, not everybody raised a family, but I've just done all this first half of life as a fertile woman. Now, who am I? Who am I coming into this phase of my life? And what do I want? And what do I want to use the wisdom that I've gathered for, not only to make my life better, but to possibly contribute to the world in better ways, to have, even if the impact is for us to be the best us we can be, the most centered and balanced and harmonized, and access to our wholeness and our thrivingness, that contributes to the world even if we don't leave our house, right? But there are people, women, who want to make bigger impacts in wider circles, and all of it's good. It doesn't matter. And you might have heard the term, that brain track, last brain track of it's, I don't think it was talked about in this book, but it was in another book. I can't even tell you how many books I've read on menopause and the second half of life and all the things. But it's like, that's the fuck you 50s brain track. That's where we're like, no, I need this boundary here. I'm going to say no when I mean no, and yes when I mean yes. And it's like, it's so liberating to be able to have access to that, especially because we didn't have access to it in the first half of our life. So I forgot your question again. I get off on tangents, but did I answer your question?
Yeah, just what you do, like, how do you help people?
Oh, what I do. Right. Yeah. So we get clear on all of that, and we start nurturing what wants to be nurtured, and we stop giving our energy away to places that are sucking us dry. And, we learn how to thrive in this body, in this phase of life. And that's a sacred path.
Yeah.
I have discovered.
That's good. That's amazing. So before we go today, can you give us, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Okay, I would say two things. One, cultivate your life force. And I'm giving you a free gift to do this. So cultivate it. If you do nothing else, this is a foundational brick in your foundation. Even if you think you are, far down the line in your spiritual practices, most people forget this core basic and they just run forward on other things. And the other thing is, everybody's life force, it has a creative impulse to it. I would say, if you were to turn towards this creative impulse that is yours and yours alone, it doesn't mean you have to become an artist or a sculptor or a painter or any of that, but we're already being creative all day long. I'm saying get conscious about it and cultivate it in a way that it's nourishment for you. And so those are the things I would say.
That's beautiful. So thank you again for your free gift. And to our audience, all her contact will be in our show notes here today. Thank you once again for joining us at Menopause Matter, and I will look forward to see you in our next recording. Thank you again.
Thank you.